listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Get Smarter podcast. On previous episodes, we've talked about change, we talked about Industry 4.0, and now we're going to bring it all together and talk about workforce development in this changing landscape. So I'm really excited to have Beth Torres as my guest today. Beth is the head of manufacturing for Eviden, which is a global technology solution provider. She focuses on finding secure, decarbonized digital solutions to help manufacturing organizations meet their business outcomes or help them solve problems. So for over 20 years, Beth has provided customer-centric service to the public sector, technology companies, and now primarily manufacturing industry. For over a decade, Beth has also been teaching leadership and organizational theory and other business-related topics at the University of Maryland's Global Campus. Beth lives in Colorado. So Beth is live from Colorado right now with her husband and the youngest of her 4 children. So Beth, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to Get Smarter.
Thank you, Tara. I'm thrilled to be here.
Great. Well, let's just dive in. So I'm going to read a little bit of the research, but it's fair to say that the research and the op-eds are out, and everybody's talking about the talent pool and workforce shortage. For example, and I'll just read this, some stats claim there will be 2.5 million vacant jobs by 2028. 2028 is right around the corner. That's 5 years from now. That's in 5 years. And that 70%, 75% of companies struggle to attract young professionals and young talent amidst remote work trends, the aging workforce, and automated industries. So Beth, what we're going to kind of dive into today is I want to flip those stats on their heads, right? I want to say, are these factors, are these necessarily problems? I know that's challenging because yes, they sound quite threatening or scary, but let's talk about how maybe these trends could be manifesting in the workplace. I mean, for example, there's always going to be a portion of the workforce that's aging. There's always going to be a portion of the workforce that is looking towards retirement. At least we hope. At least I hope. I want one day to hopefully retire. And then the automation, the fear of the automation. But maybe we could think about it in terms of automation shifting jobs rather than replacing them or replacing the need for, a human workforce, if people take it to the absolute other end of the spectrum. So as we think about that, there's also an uprising of IIoT and Industry 4.0, huge disruptors, but they have the promise of great opportunity. However, the path to implementing them seems uncertain and hasn't always produced the results that organizations hope they're going to get when they buy those sensors, when they get their connectivity in their smart factories. In the center of all this disruption, of all this fear and uncertainty is the workforce, a workforce that needs to learn and that needs to learn to work in a new way. So I said a lot there, taking the trend, the macro level trends, and then trying to bring it down to the workforce. But I want to ask you, Beth, when you hear all that and listen to all that, what are your reactions like to those statements?
Well, I think you touch on something that's very important to highlight, which is this is just the evolution of change. This is the evolution of workforce. If you look at the turn of the century, the previous century, when we moved from hard and fast manufacturing to much more automated manufacturing, the same thing happened.
Right.
We took a lot of the individuals out of the workforce. This is inevitable. And so really at the heart of this is making sure that people understand change is coming, whether they want it or not, and that they can be a part of that. They have control to adopt and adapt to these changes, learn new skills, evolve, be a part of the future. But yeah, that is absolutely inevitable. But you're right. The aging workforce, we're all aging, right?
Right.
Nothing against every last one of us. We're not getting any younger. So what are we going to do to stay relevant? If you want to stay relevant, if you want to continue to contribute to your field, you're
Yeah.
going to have to adopt. It is what
Yeah.
it is.
It is what it is. I mean, there's always going to be, I mean, the one thing that is a cardinal truth is that there's going to be change. Also, then there's going to be resistance to change.
Sure.
We know this. Um, and one of the things that I wanted to kind of talk with you about is that accepting change can be really hard. Um, but what are some of the things that you think can help people accept change? For example, one of the there's lots of change models out there, but one that I particularly like is ProSize model, which is the ADKAR, which stands for awareness. Like the first step is make people aware of the need for change. Um, and what do you think about that, and about how can we, it's easy to say, well, you're just going to have to change, but how can we make that a little bit easier for people, or how can we put out the awareness there for change? Whose job do you think that is, Beth?
Well, I think the undercurrent of ADKAR and really any change management principle is
Mm-hmm.
communication. And it's
Communication.
effective communication. One-sided and ineffective communication exists also, but effective communication is really the catalyst for ensuring change happens more smoothly.
Yeah.
Um, whose responsibility is it? It has to start at the top. If you have an executive leadership team that is not buying off and supportive of the change, nobody else is either.
Why would they?
Right,
And if
exactly.
they do, they're pushing up,
That's
right? They're,
correct.
yeah.
So I think that that awareness is really critical, establishing the communication, letting them know this is what's changing. This is how it's changing. This is
Yeah.
when it's changing. This is how it's impactful to you. This is what you can do about it. All these are really key components of intertwining the individual into that change, but
Yeah.
starting with ensuring that they know a change even exists.
Right. Right. And bringing them into it,
Hmm.
and the leaders setting that pace,
Hmm.
right? So this kind of leads nicely into the next question, um, which is tricky. How best do we try to prepare a workforce pipeline that can adapt, that can be resilient to economic and change, into new technology? I mean, is that the job of schools? I mean, should companies and organizations get more involved? We hear things about apprentice or upskill, reskill, but I mean, how realistic is that? What do you think about those ideas to meet those needs?
I think it's a balance of all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
You need a new emerging workforce. You also need the schools to be educating this new and emerging workforce
Right.
with the latest in technology. But you can't lose sight of the people who've been in the force for 20 plus years. They bring wisdom that you cannot get in that first year out of college.
Right.
It's wisdoms, it's people interaction, it's the dynamics of operating in a business environment. So you have to have this interaction. I mean, let's face it, nothing we do is rocket science, right? We can learn. We are capable of learning new things if we want to. So, as long as there is that desire to continue to learn, a desire to continue to contribute, I
Right.
think you can build that pipeline of new and fresh talent with fresh graduates, with internships, with over the shoulder job training activities.
Coaching, yeah.
Absolutely. And then, arming your workforce with learning opportunities. In fact, I just finished a cloud certification earlier this week for one
Good for
of
you.
the hyperscalers. And so that to me is relevant to my business. It helps me be better at my job. So of course I want to continue learning. I would encourage anybody who works with me or for me to do the exact same thing.
Hmm. No, I think that's a really good insight. And in thinking about, you know, those dynamics, the incoming workforce and the experienced workforce, they can learn from each other.
Of
You
course.
know, right? I mean, I swear, sometimes my daughter teaches me things, teaches me tricks about an app that I wasn't going to figure out, you know, and hopefully I'm teaching her some things too that she could use in her life. But yeah, they can learn from each other. And there's that, there's the growth that comes from that mutual learning and that relationship. But I think you said something very important there about about providing opportunities. You
Mhm.
know, like, yeah, we want our workforce to have that internal fire, that internal drive to, like, you know, sit on the webinar or go find you know, go the extra mile on the floor to learn something new about maybe a different piece of equipment you didn't know that much about. But, you know, it should be, or should it be, the the or should the company be motivated, I guess, you know, to offer, to curate, to direct, you know, the workforce into some learning opportunities.
They should, right? When you have to hire somebody, it costs the company money.
Yeah.
You've already invested in an individual who knows your organization, who's dedicated, loyal, committed, all of those wonderful attributes that you want. It is in a company's best interest to give them the opportunity to grow and develop with the company instead of
Hmm.
saying, oh, no, you're no longer relevant. We're going to go find somebody else.
For
That doesn't
external,
do
yeah.
anybody good.
Hmm. Yeah, grow your own, right?
Mhm.
But do you, I mean, that, I think that takes a really mature company readiness, and like to be able to forecast talent needs, and then make those pathways available to your talent. Do you know anybody that's doing it right? Like, do you have an example of, you know, an organization that's just got it down in terms of um, preparing the
No,
workforce? Yeah, I
there's
know.
no such
I think.
thing as perfect. I think I've learned a lot from different companies, and I think there are pockets of success.
Hmm.
Um, but no, I've never seen it done like just right. I know that here at Eviden, we are approaching this with an open mind and with the long, you know, kind of the long
The
game.
long game. Yeah.
Right. We really want to know that we're recruiting, we're retaining the best and the brightest. And there's a lot that goes around that beyond just continuous learning. It's also creating a basis of culture that people want to come to work for and they want to be inspired to continue to contribute to. So I think that there's many facets to that, but no, I can't say I've ever seen perfect.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are, you know, we are human, and we develop really cool stuff. So I think that, and that there is a lot of support out there, though. And like you said, there's a lot of inspiration out there, and there's a lot more options than there ever was before.
For sure.
I mean, I know, you know, at Life Cycle Engineering, we have the Institute, which is really trying to develop programs that will build capabilities in the area of reliability engineering and core key plant personnel like planners and schedulers and storeroom managers. And then there's Tooling U and SME, the Society of Manufacturing Engineering, you know, that have merged to try to develop massive large scale programming from trade schools into, you know, into the industrial environment. So there's a lot out there, and there's a lot of programs that are good. I think you just have to find it, and even at your level, right? So just because the organization isn't providing curated learning paths, you know, now, okay, get smarter, listeners. My instructional design, my learning professional certification and pass is coming to the forefront now, but learning paths for people. But if you're a manager you know what you know what your development needs are, or you should try to figure it out, for your team. Um, and try to craft it out. There's more free resources than there ever were, before to do it. And I mean, that breeds engagement, right? Like when you're providing opportunities for your people, even if the organization isn't, you can as a manager, like empower, right? Let's talk about leading by example, or let's talk about what can we do to make these opportunities that are out there, or to try to, lift up that continuous learning type of mindset. What are some things, that we could do to help?
Well, I mean, at the heart is leading by example. I mentioned just a little bit ago, I finished the cloud certification. Really,
Mm-hmm.
I was interested, I want to develop, but I also want to set an example for the rest of my workforce to say, if I am interested and this is beneficial, I assure you, you can gain something from it too. And similarly, I looked to my boss, who I
Yeah.
think is a wonderful leader, and I said, Frank, have you completed
Ah!
the cloud certification? And he's prioritizing it, right? Because you can't tell your workforce to go forth. It's important, but it's not important to me. It
Ah,
doesn't
that's
work.
that. Yeah, that's that sponsorship that we were talking about, the change, right?
Yeah.
So if you're asking other people to you have to look in the mirror and be the change, right?
No,
So that's not always that easy to do
it's
either.
not.
All right, Frank, did you hear, Beth? We're checking in on you in 90 days. No, I think that's great. But it is something, to aspire to. Um, I want to kind of go in a different direction, because I read an article, that you wrote on LinkedIn that really was inspiring, and I thought important to highlight in this episode. Um, it was an article on inclusion and diversity in the technology-based industry, especially around women in tech. And that there are some actions that all of us can take, to move the needle to become a bigger part of the population. What are some key topics that you'd like our listeners to take away on this topic? And by the way, we'll have a link to that LinkedIn article in our episode notes, so listeners come back and go to the link and check it out. But what are some key thoughts that you'd like our listeners to take away about that?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for giving voice to it because it's something that is near and dear to me.
Hmm.
And I'm trying to use my role to create more voice, more action around this particular topic. So, diversity, inclusion, equity are
Hmm.
not buzzwords. I want to impress that upon people. They are actions. They have to be driven from every layer of the organization. It has to be important and it has to be action oriented. We have got to target hiring actions. We have to create an environment that is inclusive
That's
and
right.
equitable for everybody. And and I speak to women, but that really encompasses a variety of peoples.
Sure.
You could take women in tech and you could say women in manufacturing, women in engineering, women in any field that is underrepresented. And if you want to have a stronger representation, there has to be action.
There's work. Yeah.
There is. All too often, organizations want to continue the construct that they have built and then squeeze these minority groups into
Right?
it and say, good luck. This is
Yeah.
what it is. Go forth and flourish.
We gave you the opportunity. Here you are.
Exactly. And that doesn't do anything for anyone.
Right.
Instead, we have to stop this mindset, look to what people need to be the best versions of themselves and create an environment that supports them to do exactly that. We are all special, unique, and have something to contribute. If you want that to shine through, you have to create an environment that allows it.
That's so inspiring. Thank you. And because of, for the listeners of this podcast, I did want to highlight two organizations that I'm affiliated with, that are targeted at women in the industrial environment. First is women in manufacturing. It's very easy. You can Google it, go straight to the link. And then the next one is a women in reliability and asset management. Maura Abad is the founder and leader of that networking group, and they're just great resources as well, to go to and to learn, and network with other professionals. So I just want to shout that out to the listeners, and we'll be putting links to those in the episode notes as well. But I think your thoughts on that are spot on. If you want people to be the best versions of themselves, then you need to create an environment that is going to allow them to do that. And I mean, that goes across the board.
Yep,
Across
absolutely.
the board. And that's something else that, comes from the top, and that's that culture you were talking about. Oh my gosh, well, we've gone a lot of places in this discussion. We've talked about, how to help people more through the change, what kind of a big piece communication is in that, and bringing people into the change, not just one-way communication, but helping them see themselves through the change. And then as leaders, or as managers, or as people in influential positions, or people who are asking others to change, you got to walk the walk. You have to lead by example, and that means verbs. And speaking of verbs, diversify, include. What do we do for equity? Equify? I don't know. I got to think of a verb for that. I'll try to think of that. Put that in. Elevate. I don't know. I'll have to put that in. I'll think of something and put that in the show notes. But I do think we talked about some important topics, but it's just been uplifting to talk to you. And, I just want to thank you so much, Beth, for being a guest on Get Smarter. And I'd like to know if there's any last thoughts you'd like to give to our listeners on the scariness of change and on workforce development before we sign off.
I think my only parting thought is to not see change as a problem or something to overcome. Instead, change is something to work with. And if you see it as such, you have so much more opportunity to be a part of the change and to continue to evolve personally, professionally, wherever it applies in your life. So I always try to encourage people to see that there is always opportunity in change and that they can be a part of it.
Always opportunity and change. Be a part of it. I love it. Very inspirational, especially when like I said, we know that there is resistance as a natural human tendency. Fear or whatever it is, or but to be able to open up your mind to see that every change offers a chance for an alternative opportunity. That's why it's there.
Well,
Yeah. That's why it's there. Well, if listeners want to find you, they can find you on LinkedIn. And like I said, we're going to put some resources into the episode notes. And I want, again, thank you, Beth, for joining us. And for our listeners, we'll see you next time on Get Smarter. Until then, stay smarter, people.